Mom, I need help. This date feels wrong. 27-year-old Elena Martinez sent that text from a restaurant bathroom in Dallas, staring at herself in the mirror. Emerald dress, perfect makeup, and a sick feeling in her stomach that wouldn't go away. She was on a dinner date with her ex-boyfriend Ethan, the same Ethan who'd cheated on her 2 months ago. The same Ethan her mother insisted deserved a second chance. Her mother texted back, "You're being dramatic. Go back out there and be gracious." So Elena did what she'd always done. She obeyed. She walked back to that table, sat down across from a man who'd betrayed her, and tried to smile through her discomfort. But someone else in that restaurant was watching. A Korean businessman named Jin Park, sitting 3 tables away, nursing a whiskey and pretending to read emails on his phone. And when he saw Ethan grab Elena's wrist hard enough to make her go still, Jin stopped pretending. What happened next would force Elena to choose between her mother's expectations and her own survival. But here's what I need to ask you. Have you ever felt trapped by someone else's vision for your life? Have you ever had to choose between making your family happy and making yourself whole? Because this story is about that exact moment when everything hangs in the balance. But to understand how Elena ended up at that table, we need to go back 3 weeks to the phone call that started everything. 3 weeks earlier, Elena sat curled up on her couch in her Houston apartment, staring at her iPhone as it lit up for the 5th time that evening. Mom again. She'd been ignoring the calls all week, ever since she'd ended things with Ethan. Ever since she'd finally drawn a line she refused to cross. On her coffee table sat a half-empty bottle of Barefoot Moscato and her MacBook Air open to a marketing proposal she'd been trying to focus on for the past 2 hours. A Target throw blanket was wrapped around her shoulders even though it was 70 degrees outside. Comfort. She needed comfort. When the phone rang for the 6th time, Elena finally answered. "Elena Marie Martinez, why have you been avoiding me?" Her mother's voice carried that particular blend of hurt and accusation that always made Elena's chest tighten. "I haven't been avoiding you, Mom. I've just been busy with work." "Too busy to tell your own mother that you broke up with Ethan?" Silence. "Linda called me yesterday," Rosa continued. "She was in tears, Elena. Tears. Her son came to her house devastated, saying you ended things without even giving him a chance to explain." Elena closed her eyes. Of course Ethan had gotten to her mother first. Of course he'd controlled the narrative. "He cheated on me, Mom." "People make mistakes, baby, don't you think?" "No." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't think he made a mistake. He made a choice, and I made mine." But here's the thing about mothers. They know exactly which wounds to press when they're desperate. "I'm not saying you have to marry him," Rosa said softly. "I'm just saying, baby, you're 27, and I've watched you go through so many relationships that didn't work out." Elena could recite the list in her sleep. Philip, who'd talked about marriage for 6 months before admitting he wasn't ready for commitment. David, who'd emotionally checked out 3 months before he finally said the words. Tyler, whose idea of a future together was, "Let's just see where things go," for 2 years. 2 years. "Ethan is different," Rosa pressed. "He has a good job. He comes from a good family. Linda and I have known each other since college. You know that. These are good people, Elena. And good men who actually want commitment are hard to find." "He cheated on me, Mom." Elena repeated the words slowly, willing her mother to hear them. Really hear them. "He made a mistake. One mistake. Don't you think everyone deserves a second chance?" And there it was. The question that would change everything. The text messages had appeared on Ethan's phone 2 weeks before this conversation. Elena had been at his uptown Dallas apartment, using his iPhone to order Uber Eats, while hers charged in the bedroom. The notification had popped up at the top of the screen. "Stephanie work. Can't wait to see you Friday. Should I bring the wine or are you handling everything?" Elena's thumb had hesitated over the screen, then she'd opened the thread. 3 months of messages. Hotel names. Emojis that made her stomach turn. Plans that overlapped with nights Ethan had told her he was working late on a client proposal. When she'd confronted him, he'd cycled through every line in the cheater's playbook. Denial first, then minimization. It didn't mean anything, Elena, it was just stress relief. That's what he'd called it. Stress relief. Elena had packed her purse, called an Uber, and delivered her decision in the calm, clear voice of someone who'd finally learned to recognize patterns. We're done. I need you to respect that. She'd meant it. She'd really meant it. Until her mother got involved. 2 days after that phone call with Rosa, Ethan showed up at her mother's house in Houston's 3rd Ward. He brought roses from Whole Foods, the expensive kind, wrapped in brown paper with a silk ribbon. Rosa let him in. "Mrs. Martinez, I know I don't deserve your time," Ethan had said, deploying every ounce of the charm that had fooled Elena for 4 months. "But I need you to know I made the biggest mistake of my life. I hurt your daughter, and that's something I'll regret for the rest of my days." He'd sat in Rosa's living room in the same chair Elena's father used to occupy before his heart attack 7 years ago, and he'd talked about redemption, about growth, about how sometimes people need to lose something precious to realize its value. "I love Elena," he'd said, looking Rosa directly in the eyes. "And I know that if I could just talk to her face to face, I could show her that I've learned from this, that I'll never take her for granted again." Rosa had listened, and in Ethan's earnest performance, she'd heard everything she wanted to hear. That her daughter's relationship could be saved, that there could still be a wedding, grandchildren, the future she'd been dreaming about since Elena turned 25. That night, Rosa had called Elena, and the night after that, and the night after that. "Just one dinner," she'd pleaded. "Just hear him out properly. You owe him that much closure, don't you? You owe yourself the chance to walk away knowing you gave him a fair hearing. You owe him. You owe yourself." The language of obligation wrapped in the language of care. By the 3rd day of calls, Elena was exhausted. Exhausted from defending her decision. Exhausted from managing her mother's disappointment. Exhausted from wondering if, maybe, just maybe, she was being too rigid, too unforgiving, too difficult. So she'd agreed. One dinner at the Monarch in Dallas, Saturday at 7 p.m., just to end the conversation. Just to make her mother stop crying on the phone. Just to prove to everyone, including herself, that she'd tried. Elena had just returned from the bathroom, her phone clutched in her hand, her mother's dismissive text still burning in her mind. She slid back into her seat across from Ethan, forcing herself to smile, to do what she'd always done. Make herself smaller to keep the peace. But someone else in that restaurant had been watching. Jin Park had noticed Elena the moment she'd arrived. The emerald dress, the nervous energy, the way her composure shifted when Ethan showed up late. He'd watched her excuse herself to the bathroom, watched her check her phone with desperate hope, watched her shoulders fall when she read whatever message had come through. And now, as Ethan reached across the table to grab her wrist, his fingers tight, possessive, his voice low with warning, Jin stopped pretending to review emails on his phone. He stood, straightened his Tom Ford jacket, and walked toward their table with the calm, controlled presence of a man who'd made a decision. "Elena Martinez?" She looked up to find a man standing beside their table, tall, impeccably dressed, with dark eyes that held something she couldn't quite name. Not anger, not pity. Something deliberate. "I'm Jin Park," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "We met at the digital marketing conference in Austin last month. I've been meaning to reach out about that case study we discussed." Elena's mind went blank. She'd never been to a marketing conference in Austin. She'd never seen this man before in her life. But she understood what he was offering. An exit. A story. A way out that wouldn't require her to make a scene. "Oh," she heard herself say, pulling her wrist free from Ethan's loosened grip. "Yes, The conference. Ethan's face darkened. We're actually in the middle of dinner. I apologize for the interruption, Jin said, his tone polite but utterly unmoved by Ethan's territorial display. But I'm heading out now, and I have those materials in my car. It'll only take a moment. He looked at Elena, and his voice softened just slightly. If you have time. It was the "if you have time" that did it, the way he made it a question, the way he gave her the choice. Elena stood up, grabbing her Michael Kors purse from the back of her chair. I should get those materials, I've been waiting for them. Elena. Ethan's voice carried a warning. Sit down. She didn't. Jin stepped aside, allowing her to move past him, and she caught the faintest scent of expensive cologne, something woodsy and clean. As they walked toward the exit, she could feel Ethan's eyes burning into her back, could imagine him calculating whether to follow, whether to make a scene. He didn't. Whatever he saw in Jin's calm, controlled presence made him stay in his seat. The Dallas evening air hit Elena's face like a permission slip to breathe. Her phone started buzzing immediately. Text after text, lighting up her screen. Mom. Where are you going? Mom. Elena, who is that man? Mom. Are you seriously leaving your date for a stranger? Mom. Elena Marie Martinez, answer me. Do you need a moment? Jin asked, his voice carrying none of the urgency vibrating through her phone. Elena silenced it and dropped it into her purse. No, I just need to not be here. They walked 2 blocks to where a black Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb. Jin opened the passenger door, then paused. I can call you an Uber, he said quietly. Or I can drive you home. Your choice. But I won't leave you here if you don't feel safe. There it was again. The choice. The permission to decide. Can you just drive? Elena said. I don't care where. I just can't go home yet. For the first 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Jin drove with the same controlled precision he'd used at the restaurant. Smooth, unhurried, completely present. Classical music played softly through the speakers. Something by Chopin, Elena thought, though she couldn't be sure. Finally, he asked, Are you safe? Not, are you okay? Not, what was that about? Just, are you safe? And something about that question, about the way it cut through all the performance and got straight to what mattered, broke something loose in Elena's chest. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. The exhausted, slightly unhinged laugh of someone who's been pushed past their limit. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know if I'm safe. I don't know if I just made the stupidest decision of my life, getting in a car with a complete stranger. I don't know why my mother thinks I owe a cheater a second chance. I don't know why saying no isn't enough. Jin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 3 years ago, my cousin Mia called me. She was being pressured into a marriage she didn't want, to someone in our family's business who had a reputation for violence. She asked me to help her leave. He paused at a red light, his hands steady on the wheel. I told her I'd figure something out, that I'd call her back after a meeting. I was 12 hours too late. His voice didn't waver, but Elena could hear the weight behind the words. She tried to take her own life rather than go through with it. She's been in a coma ever since. Elena's breath caught. I saw you texting under the table, Jin continued softly. I saw your shoulders, the way you made yourself smaller every time he spoke. I saw him grab your wrist. He glanced at her briefly. I couldn't walk past that again. The car fell silent except for Chopin and the soft hum of the engine. I'm not asking you to trust me, Jin said, but I'm asking you to let me make sure you get home safely. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, setting it gently in the cup holder between them. My number's there. No obligation, no expectation, just if you want to talk to someone who gets it. Elena picked up the card. Embossed letters, heavy stock, Gin Park, import, export operations. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me for doing what should have been done 20 minutes earlier. he said quietly. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. The problem with being rescued by a stranger is that you have to go home and explain it to everyone who thinks they know better. Elena woke up Sunday morning to the sound of someone pounding on her apartment door. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. 17 missed calls from her mother. 12 text messages she hadn't had the energy to read last night. She knew who was at the door before she opened it. Rosa stood in the hallway, still in her church clothes from early service, her face a mixture of fury and fear that only a mother can manage simultaneously. Elena Marie Martinez. Her mother's voice was low, controlled, the kind of calm that meant she was anything but. We need to talk. Now. Elena stepped aside, letting her mother into the apartment. Who is he? Rosa demanded before Elena could even close the door. Who is this man you left with last night? Do you have any idea how that looked? How worried I was? I texted you that I was fine. You got into a car with a complete stranger, Elena. A stranger. While you were supposed to be having dinner with Ethan, a man you've known for months, a man whose family we know. A man who cheated on me, Elena interrupted quietly. A man who grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a mark when I tried to pull away. Rosa paused, but only for a moment. Linda called me last night, 3 times. She said Ethan was humiliated, that you left him sitting there alone while you walked out with some Asian businessman who interrupted your dinner. His name is Jin Park. And he didn't interrupt. He rescued me. Rescued you? Rosa's voice rose. From what? From a man trying to apologize? From someone who made one mistake and wants to make it right? And there it was. The same script. The same pressure. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. A boundary forming. Hardening. You loved Ethan because he made you comfortable, Mom, she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Because his family looked like success to you. Because Linda is your friend. And having me date her son meant you had something to talk about at church besides everyone else's grandchildren. Rosa's face went pale. That's not fair. You never once asked me if he made me happy, Elena continued. You asked if he was serious about commitment, if he had a good job, if his family had good values. But you never asked if I felt safe with him. If I felt seen. If I felt like I could be myself. I was trying to protect you. From what? Elena's voice cracked slightly. From being alone? Yes. The word exploded out of Rosa. Yes, Elena. I watched you go through relationship after relationship. I watched you get your heart broken over and over. And I thought, finally, here's someone stable. Someone serious. Someone who won't leave. Mom. Elena's voice was gentle now. I watched you fall apart when Daddy died. I watched you lose yourself because your entire identity was wrapped up in being his wife. And I love you. God, I love you so much. But I won't build my life that way. I won't sacrifice who I am just to avoid disappointing you. The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. So I'm the villain now? For wanting my daughter to have security? For not wanting you to end up alone at 40? You're not the villain, Elena said softly. But you're not listening to me either. I need you to trust that I know what's right for my life, even when it doesn't look like what you expected. Rosa picked up her purse with trembling hands. I can't do this right now. I just can't. She left without another word. The door closed quietly behind her, which somehow felt worse than if she'd slammed it. Elena stood in her living room, still in her pajamas, and wondered if she'd just destroyed the most important relationship in her life. 3 days passed. 3 days of Elena staring at Jin's business card propped against her Keurig coffee maker. 3 days of picking up her phone, pulling up a new text message, and then setting it back down. What was she supposed to say? Thanks for rescuing me from my disaster date. Want to grab coffee? It sounded insane. She didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about him except that he'd lost someone he loved and apparently had impeccable timing. Work didn't help. Her creative director had been acting strange all week, taking calls in the conference room with the door closed, updating his LinkedIn profile when he thought no one was looking. And the Lexus campaign pitch was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to finalize a presentation that was supposed to showcase their entire team's capabilities. By Friday evening, Elena sat on her couch with a glass of Chardonnay and Jin's card in her hand. Her mother hadn't called. Not once. The silence felt like its own kind of punishment. She thought about Mia, about being trapped, about waiting too long. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "This is Elena Martinez from the restaurant. Are you free for coffee?" She hit send before her anxiety could stop her. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "I thought you'd forgotten about me. Saturday 2 p.m. I know a quiet place in Dallas. I'll text you the address." Elena stared at the message, her heart pounding in a way that felt nothing like fear and everything like possibility. Maybe making the right choice wasn't supposed to feel safe. Maybe it was supposed to feel like this, uncertain and terrifying, and somehow exactly what she needed. Before we continue, I want to pause and ask you something. If you're connecting with Elena's story, if you've ever had to choose between your own truth and someone else's expectations, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because these stories matter. Your story matters. And the more we grow this community, the more stories we can tell together. Now let's get back to Elena and Jin. First dates are supposed to be about favorite movies and travel dreams, not about dead cousins and the weight of inherited obligations. But then again, Elena thought as she pulled into the parking lot of Cafe Sol in Dallas's Koreatown, nothing about meeting Jin Park had been typical from the start. The cafe was tucked between a Korean grocery store and a skincare shop, its minimalist storefront almost easy to miss. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows let in afternoon light that made everything feel warm and unhurried. The scent of fresh brewed coffee mixed with something sweet. Maybe honey bread or red bean pastries. Jin was already there, sitting at a corner table near the window. He stood when he saw her, and Elena noticed he'd dressed differently than at the restaurant. Still expensive, the kind of casually perfect that comes from brands like Brunello Cucinelli, but softer somehow. A charcoal sweater, dark jeans, no suit jacket, no tie, just a man waiting for coffee. "You found it okay?" he asked as she approached. "GPS is a wonderful thing," Elena said, settling into the chair across from him. A small smile touched his lips. "I thought about suggesting Starbucks, but this place has better coffee and fewer people." "Fewer people who might know me, you mean?" "Fewer people who might interrupt us," he corrected gently. They started safe. Work mostly. Elena talked about her marketing firm in Houston, the campaigns she was developing, the pitch for Lexus that was keeping her up at night. Jin listened in a way that felt different from every other date she'd been on. No checking his Apple Watch, no glancing at his phone, no waiting for his turn to talk about himself. He asked questions that showed he was actually paying attention. "What drew you to marketing? Was it always the plan?" "My father," Elena found herself saying. "He worked in advertising before he passed. Used to say that good marketing doesn't sell products. It tells people a story about who they could be." She paused. "I guess I wanted to keep telling stories." Jin nodded slowly. 7 years ago, you said. In the car." She was surprised he remembered. Heart attack. He was only 53. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple. But he didn't follow them with platitudes about time healing or everything happening for a reason. Just acknowledgement. Just presence. "What about you?" Elena asked, grateful to shift focus. "Import-export operations. What does that actually mean?" "It means," Jin said carefully, "that my family moves products between countries. Primarily between South Korea and the United States. Legitimate business mostly. Electronics, automotive parts, textiles. He paused. The company started in Seoul. My father built it from nothing. I was supposed to expand the American operations after I graduated from UT Austin. Supposed to? It was never really a choice, he said quietly. In my family, duty comes before preference. You inherit the business, you fulfill expectations. You don't ask what you want. You ask what's needed. Elena recognized the weight in those words. That sounds lonely. It is. Jin met her eyes. Mia, my cousin, she understood that. She was being pressured into an arranged marriage with someone in our extended business network. A man with a temper. With a reputation. His hands tightened slightly around his coffee cup. She called me, asked for help, and I told her I'd figure something out after a meeting. I had some contract negotiation I thought was important. His voice went flat. By the time I got to her, she'd tried to end her life. She's been in a coma for 3 years. The doctors say she'll probably never wake up. The silence between them felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. My mother hasn't spoken to me in 5 days, Elena said finally, because I chose myself instead of the man she wanted me to choose. Because I walked away from Ethan instead of giving him another chance. Because I'm not following the script she wrote for my life. Do you regret it? Walking away from Ethan? No. Elena traced the rim of her coffee cup. But disappointing my mother? That part kills me. She lost my father and rebuilt her entire identity around being my mother. And now I'm pulling away. And she thinks I'm abandoning her. You're not abandoning her, Jin said quietly. You're just refusing to abandon yourself. Something in Elena's chest cracked open at those words. 4 hours passed like 4 minutes. The cafe staff started stacking chairs on tables, and Elena realized with a start that the sun had set outside the windows. Jin walked her to her car, a Honda Accord she'd been driving since college, suddenly feeling very ordinary next to his Mercedes parked 2 spots away. Can I see you again? He asked. No games, no, I'll text you without meaning it. Just a direct question. I'd like that, Elena said. And she meant it. Dating is complicated enough without your ex-boyfriend showing up drunk in a parking garage with a grudge and 3 witnesses. But Elena was getting ahead of herself. 3 weeks into seeing Jin, and she'd learned things about him that made her previous relationships feel like practice runs. He texted her good morning every day, not with emojis or memes, but with actual words. He remembered she didn't like cilantro. He asked about her Lexus pitch the way some men asked about the weather, genuinely interested. Actually listening to her answers, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm, dinner twice a week. Long phone calls on the nights they didn't see each other, the kind of slow-building chemistry that felt more grown-up than anything Elena had experienced before. And then, 4 days before her biggest presentation of the year, everything fell apart. Elena arrived at work Monday morning to find her creative director's office empty. Not just empty, cleared out. His diplomas were gone from the wall. His Keurig was missing from the credenza. Even his collection of design books had vanished. Her boss called an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. Matthew accepted a position with Sterling and Associates, he said, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. Effective immediately. Sterling and Associates, their biggest competitor. And Matthew had been the lead on the Lexus presentation, the one scheduled for Friday afternoon. The one that could make or break Elena's chance at a promotion to senior executive. 4 days. She had 4 days to rebuild a presentation that was supposed to showcase their entire creative team's capabilities. By Wednesday afternoon, Elena sat in her apartment surrounded by presentation boards, her MacBook open to a PowerPoint that felt more like a death sentence than a career opportunity. Her printer had jammed twice. She'd spilled coffee on her notes. She stared at her phone, at Jin's contact information. He had connections, business contacts across Texas, people who could probably make a few calls, smooth some paths, maybe even get the Lexus executives predisposed to say yes. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. That wasn't the woman her father had raised. Still, she called him. Elena. Jin answered on the second ring. Everything okay? And God, wasn't that the question? She told him everything. About Matthew, about the presentation, about the fact that half her pitch had been built around industry connections she no longer had access to. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Jin asked, "Do you want me to make calls? Or do you want me to help you figure out how to do this yourself?" Elena closed her eyes. Of course. Of course he wouldn't just swoop in and fix it. Of course he'd give her the choice. "Help me figure it out," she whispered. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jin showed up with his laptop, a notepad, and 3 hours of his undivided attention. He didn't tell her what to do. He asked questions, challenged her assumptions, pushed her to own her vision instead of hiding behind Matthew's reputation. "What made you want this account?" he asked. "The brand story," Elena said. "Lexus isn't just selling cars, they're selling craftsmanship, attention to detail, the idea that luxury should be accessible, not exclusive. So tell them that story. Your way, not Matthew's way." By the time Elena walked into that conference room Friday afternoon, she owned every word of her presentation, every slide, every strategic recommendation. And when the Lexus executive said yes, when they specifically mentioned her fresh perspective and authentic passion for the brand, Elena knew she'd earned it. That evening, Jin picked up Thai food from Elena's favorite restaurant in Houston. They sat on her apartment floor eating pad thai straight from the containers, and Elena felt lighter than she had in months. "Thank you," she said, "for not just fixing it for me." "You didn't need fixing," Jin said simply. "You just needed someone to remind you what you're capable of." They were still laughing about her boss's face when she'd nailed the closing statement when Elena heard shouting from the parking garage below her window. Her blood went cold. She knew that voice. Ethan stood in the parking garage, clearly drunk, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes wild. He'd been waiting, watching. 3 weeks, he slurred as Elena and Jin stepped out of the building's entrance. 3 weeks of you ignoring my calls, my texts, my apologies. For him? The racial slur that followed made Elena's stomach turn. Jin stepped slightly in front of her, his body language shifting into something Elena had never seen before. Controlled, dangerous, completely calm. "Ethan, you need to leave," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need to leave?" Ethan laughed bitterly. He lunged forward, grabbing Elena's wrist hard enough to make her gasp. "You humiliated me, left me sitting in that restaurant like some—" He didn't finish the sentence. Jin's hand was on Ethan's wrist, his grip precise and unyielding. "Let her go. Now." Ethan released her, stumbling back. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Jin pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Someone you don't want to know." Within 15 minutes, 3 men in dark suits appeared. Professional, efficient, terrifying in their politeness. "Mr. Vincent," one of them said, "we're going to escort you home safely. Please come with us." Ethan looked at Jin, and something in his face changed. Recognition. Fear. He went with them without another word. Elena stood in that parking garage, her wrist throbbing where Ethan had grabbed her, and looked at the man she'd been dating for 3 weeks. "Jin," she said quietly, "what just happened?" He met her eyes. "We should talk. There's a difference between knowing someone has secrets and knowing exactly what those secrets cost." They went back upstairs to Elena's apartment. She made tea, chamomile from her Keurig, because she needed something to do with her hands. Jin sat at her small kitchen table, his shoulders tense in a way she'd never seen before. "I need you to be honest with me," Elena said, setting a mug in front of him. "Those men? The way Ethan looked at you? What just happened?" Jin didn't deflect, didn't minimize. He met her eyes and told her the truth. My family's business is import, export. That part is real. We move legitimate products, electronics, automotive parts, textiles between South Korea and the United States. He paused. But we also move money. We facilitate connections between people who need things done quietly. Political favors, financial arrangements that blur legal lines. Elena's hand tightened around her mug. I'm the heir to something I didn't build but can't walk away from, Jin continued. My father started this operation 30 years ago in Seoul. Built it from nothing. And in our world, family loyalty isn't a choice. It's survival. And Ethan? Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. Those men work for my family. When I need something handled discreetly, they handle it. Ethan won't bother you again. He understands the cost of making that mistake twice. The words hung in the air between them. I need you to see it, Jin said quietly. The whole picture. Not just what I tell you, but what I actually do. Sunday morning, Jin picked Elena up in his Mercedes and drove to the Houston port. The warehouse sat among dozens of others, industrial, unremarkable, with the family company name in English and Korean on a modest sign out front. Inside, it looked exactly like what Jin had described: shipping containers, forklifts, workers in safety vests checking manifests on tablets. Everything legitimate, everything traceable. Then he took her to a back office where an older Korean man sat reviewing paperwork. He stood when they entered, his eyes sharp and assessing. Elena, this is Mr. Choi. He manages operations here and other aspects of the family business. Mr. Choi bowed slightly. Miss Martinez, it's good to finally meet you. Jin speaks highly of you. Mr. Choi has been with my family since I was a child, Jin said. He knew my cousin Mia. He's the one who found her after. His voice trailed off. Mr. Choi's expression softened. You care for her, he said to Elena. I can see that. And he cares for you. That is rare in this life. Jin showed her the computers that tracked both kinds of shipments, the ones that went through customs with full documentation, and the ones that moved through more carefully constructed channels. The financial systems that looked clean on paper, but served purposes she could only guess at. This is who I am, Elena, Jin said as they stood in his office overlooking the warehouse floor. I can walk away from you if this is too much. I'd understand. But I can't walk away from my family. This is my inheritance, my obligation, my cage. Elena looked at him, at this man who'd rescued her from one trap only to reveal he lived in another. I need time, she whispered, to think, to process. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. 7 days passed. 7 days of Elena not calling, not texting, not knowing what she wanted. She met her best friend Maya for brunch at a cafe in Houston. Maya, who'd known her since college, who'd witnessed every failed relationship, every broken promise. So let me get this straight, Maya said, stirring her mimosa with a straw. He's basically Korean Mafia, but he's honest about it. He helped you nail your presentation without taking credit. And he handled your psycho ex without you even asking? That's a simplified version, but yes. And you're scared because his world is dangerous, Maya. Because people in his life end up in comas. Because dating him means accepting things I don't fully understand. Maya set down her drink. Elena, honey, you spent 4 months with Ethan, and you never felt safe enough to tell him no. You've known Jin for a month, and he literally asked if you wanted him to solve your problem or help you solve it yourself. She leaned forward. Which one actually saw you? The question sat in Elena's chest like a weight. That evening, her phone rang. Mom. Elena almost didn't answer. 3 months of silence had calcified into something that felt permanent, but when she saw Mom light up her iPhone screen, something made her press accept. Elena. Rosa's voice was small, uncertain. Can we talk? In person? They met at the same Houston cafe where Rosa used to take Elena after church when she was a little girl. The same corner booth. The same menu featuring chicken salad sandwiches and sweet tea. Rosa looked older than Elena remembered. I've been talking to my therapist, Rosa started, stirring Splenda into her coffee with shaking hands. About your father. About losing him. About what I've been doing to you. Elena waited. I was so afraid of being alone that I tried to control your life, Rosa continued, tears gathering in her eyes. I convinced myself I was protecting you. But really, I was just terrified of losing the only person I have left. Mom, let me finish, baby. Rosa reached across the table, stopping just short of Elena's hand. I spoke to Jin Park. Elena's breath caught. What? He called me 2 weeks ago, from Seoul, asked if he could have a conversation. Rosa's smile was watery. He told me about his cousin, about why he helped you that night, about what he's building with you. He didn't have to do that. He said he wanted me to know that his intentions were honorable, that he understood a mother's concern. Rosa wiped her eyes with a Starbucks napkin. Your father would have liked him. Jin. He would have seen what I was too scared to see. They talked for 2 hours. The apology wasn't perfect. The wounds weren't fully healed. But it was a beginning. Boundaries with connection. Love with respect. When they stood to leave, Rosa hugged her daughter tight. I'm still learning, but I'm trying. That's all I need, Elena whispered. Elena stood in her apartment that night, staring at her phone, at Jin's contact information. She thought about safety, about authenticity, about the difference between a man who told comfortable lies and a man who offered difficult truths. She typed, "Can we talk?" His response came within seconds. Always. Where? Your place. I'm ready to see the rest. When Jin opened his door, Elena didn't wait for small talk. I'm terrified, she said. Of your world. Of what it means to be with you. Of losing myself in something I can't control. He nodded slowly. I understand. But I'm more terrified of the safe choice, she continued. Of spending my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose the man who actually sees me, even if he lives in shadows. Jin's expression shifted. Relief. Hope. Something deeper. I need you to understand what you're choosing, he said carefully. I know exactly what I'm choosing, Elena said. I'm choosing truth over comfort. I'm choosing you. Love is easy when you're in the same city. But what happens when soul calls and duty demands an answer? 6 months into their relationship, Elena and Jin had built something she'd never experienced before. Real intimacy. Real partnership. The kind of love that didn't require her to shrink or perform or pretend. They'd fallen into rhythms that felt like home. Saturday morning coffee runs to Starbucks before heading to Café Sol. Tuesday night dinners at her apartment where he'd chop vegetables while she worked on presentations at her kitchen table. Quiet evenings on his couch in Dallas, her feet in his lap while they watched Netflix and said nothing at all. It was the kind of ordinary that felt extraordinary precisely because it was real. Until the night his phone rang at 11 p.m., Elena was at Jin's apartment, wearing one of his UT Austin t-shirts and scrolling through Instagram on her iPhone while he finished some emails. His phone lit up with a call, the screen displaying Korean characters she couldn't read. She watched his face change as he answered, watched the color drain from his expression. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes, all in Korean. His voice careful, respectful, with an edge of something Elena had never heard before. Fear. When he hung up, he sat motionless for a long moment. My father had a stroke, he said finally. He's stable, but there's damage. The doctors say he can't manage the business anymore. Elena set down her phone. I'm so sorry. There's a power struggle starting in Seoul. My uncle wants to take control. Others are positioning themselves. Jin's hands tightened around his phone. I have to go back, to stabilize things, to keep the organization from tearing itself apart. For how long? 6 months. Maybe a year. He met her eyes. Maybe permanently. The words sat between them like a third presence in the room. The next 48 hours moved too fast. Jin booked a flight to Seoul departing Sunday evening, made calls to Houston and Dallas contacts, delegating operations, packed a suitcase with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of travel. Saturday night, he picked up Elena in his Mercedes and drove to Reunion Tower in downtown Dallas. They took the elevator to the observation deck, the city spreading out beneath them in a glittering grid of lights. The Omni Hotel glowed to the south. The Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge arched over the Trinity River like a silver ribbon. "I need to tell you something," Jin said, his hand steady on the railing. "My father wants me in Korea permanently. He's convinced the business needs restructuring from the top, and I'm the only one he trusts to do it." Elena's chest tightened. "I can negotiate," he continued. 6 months in Seoul, 6 months here. It would mean splitting my life between 2 continents, but I can make it work." He turned to face her fully. "I need to know if you see a future worth that negotiation. Because I can't do halfway with you, Elena. I won't ask you to wait if you're uncertain." Elena stared out at the Dallas skyline, at the life she'd built here, her apartment, her job, the city where she'd finally learned to choose herself. And she thought about every man who'd come before Jin. Matthew, who'd talked about marriage for 6 months before admitting he wasn't ready. David, who couldn't commit past the next dinner date. Tyler, whose version of forever was, "Let's just see what happens." Years of men who couldn't promise her next weekend, let alone next year. And here was Jin, asking her to believe in a future across continents and time zones and complications she couldn't fully imagine. "I'm terrified," she said, her voice breaking, "of your world, of the distance, of losing myself in something this big." He nodded slowly, accepting. "But I'm more terrified of the safe choice," Elena continued, tears streaming down her face now. "Of saying no because it's hard, of choosing comfort over truth. Over you." Jin's expression shifted. Relief, hope, love. "So yes," Elena whispered. "Yes to Seoul and Dallas. Yes to FaceTime calls at 3 a.m. Yes to building something together even when it's hard. Yes to you." He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there on that observation deck. 2 people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. It wasn't a proposal. There was no ring, no bended knee. Just a promise, a commitment, a choice to build a future together with eyes wide open to the cost. Sunday evening, Elena drove Jin to DFW Airport. They sat in the departure lane, neither of them ready to say goodbye. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "It'll be Monday afternoon your time." 14-hour time difference, Elena said, trying to smile through tears. "I Googled it." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then he was gone, disappearing into the terminal with his carry-on and the weight of an empire on his shoulders. Elena drove home through Dallas traffic, her phone already counting down the hours until his plane would land in Seoul. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to choose love without guarantees. 6 months. That's how long Elena learned that love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about who you choose when circumstances are impossible. The first FaceTime call came at 3 a.m. Houston time, just as Jin had promised. Elena answered with blurry eyes and bedhead, her iPhone propped against her Keurig while she made coffee she desperately needed. "You look beautiful," he said from 13 time zones away, and she laughed because she absolutely didn't. That became their rhythm. 3 a.m. Calls before her workday started. Late-night messages when he was having morning coffee in Seoul. Care packages sent through Amazon and Korean postal services, her favorite honey butter chips from H-Mart. His preferred ground coffee from a Houston roaster he missed. The distance was brutal, but they made it work. Jin spent those 6 months stabilizing his father's organization, negotiating with his uncle, restructuring operations to ensure transparency where it mattered and discretion where it didn't. His video calls came from hotel rooms and offices, always professional, always exhausted. "I'm making progress," he told her during week 6. "My father's agreeing to step back gradually. I think I can negotiate the split arrangement." "How much longer?" Elena asked, hating how needy she sounded. "Soon," he promised. "I'm fighting for us. I promise." Meanwhile, Elena's career was flourishing. The Lexus campaign she'd fought so hard for had exceeded every metric. By month 3 of Jin's absence, her boss called her into his office and offered her the promotion she'd been working toward for 2 years, senior executive, her own team. A salary that made her mother's concerns about financial security feel almost laughable. She called Jin immediately, forgetting it was 2 a.m. Seoul time. "I'm so proud of you," he said, voice thick with sleep and genuine joy. "You did this yourself. All of it." And she had. Without his connections, without anyone's rescue, just her own competence and her own voice. The call from her mother came on a Tuesday afternoon in month 4. Elena almost didn't answer. 3 months of silence had calcified into something that felt permanent. But when she saw Mom light up her iPhone screen, something made her press accept. "Elena." Rosa's voice was small, uncertain. "Can we talk? In person?" They met at the same Houston cafe where Rosa used to take Elena after church when she was a little girl. The same corner booth, the same menu featuring chicken salad sandwiches and sweet tea. Rosa looked older than Elena remembered. "I've been talking to my therapist," Rosa started, stirring Splenda into her coffee with shaking hands. "About your father. About losing him. About what I've been doing to you." Elena waited. "I was so afraid of being alone that I tried to control your life," Rosa continued, tears gathering in her eyes. "I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really I was just terrified of losing the only person I have left." "Mom, let me finish, baby." Rosa reached across the table, stopping just short of Elena's hand. "I spoke to Jin Park." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "He called me 2 weeks ago, from Seoul. Asked if he could have a conversation." Rosa's smile was watery. "He told me about his cousin, about why he helped you that night, about what he's building with you. He didn't have to do that. He said he wanted me to know that his intentions were honorable, that he understood a mother's concern." Rosa wiped her eyes with a Starbucks napkin. "Your father would have liked him. Jin. He would have seen what I was too scared to see." They talked for 2 hours. The apology wasn't perfect. The wounds weren't fully healed. But it was a beginning. Boundaries with connection. Love with respect. When they stood to leave, Rosa hugged her daughter tight. "I'm still learning, but I'm trying. That's all I need," Elena whispered. 2 months later, Elena stood in baggage claim at DFW Airport, her heart pounding as she watched passengers stream through the international arrivals gate. And then she saw him. Jin, wheeling a suitcase, looking thinner than when he'd left, scanning the crowd until his eyes found hers. She ran, actually ran through the airport like something out of a Hallmark movie, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet. 6 months in Seoul, 6 months here, he murmured into her hair. "I negotiated it. My father agreed. We split the operations." "You're staying?" "I'm staying," he confirmed. "Well, half the year. Is that enough?" Elena pulled back to look at him. "It's everything." Saturday night, Jin took her to the Monarch, the same upscale Dallas steakhouse where he'd first intervened. Where Elena had texted her mother from a bathroom stall, desperate and trapped, full circle. They sat at a different table this time, one near the window with a view of the Design District lights. They ordered wine. Talked about Seoul and Houston and the life they were building across 2 continents. And then, Between the appetizer and entree, Jin reached into his jacket pocket. The ring box was small. Velvet. Understated. "I'm not asking you to be my wife in a world you didn't choose," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I'm asking you to build a world with me. One where you're safe, where you're chosen, where you're free to be exactly who you are." Elena's hands trembled as she looked at the ring, a simple diamond on a platinum band, elegant and unpretentious. "This won't be easy," Jin continued. "My world is complicated. Time zones will be brutal, but I promise you honesty, partnership, a love that makes room for both of us." "Yes," Elena said through tears. "Yes to all of it." He slipped the ring on her finger and the restaurant erupted in applause from strangers who'd been watching. Later that night, Elena sat on her couch, her engagement ring catching the light, and called her mother. "Mom," she said when Rosa answered. "I said yes, and I want you there when we celebrate." There was a pause. Then Rosa's tearful voice. "I'd be honored, baby. I'd be so honored." Elena learned that sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one everyone expects. And sometimes choosing yourself means risking everything comfortable for something real. Sometimes love isn't about the perfect man with the perfect credentials and the approval of everyone who matters. Sometimes love is about the person who sees you in a bathroom stall crisis and offers you an exit. The person who gives you choices instead of demands. The person who says, "What do you want?" and actually waits for your answer. Sometimes love is scary and complicated and involves things you don't fully understand. Sometimes it means your mother cries and your friends worry, and you lie awake at 3 a.m., wondering if you've lost your mind. But sometimes, when you're brave enough to choose truth over comfort, when you're strong enough to disappoint the people who love you in order to honor yourself, when you're willing to build something real instead of something safe, you find exactly what you've been looking for all along. Someone who sees you, someone who chooses you, someone who makes room for all of you, not just the parts that are easy or convenient or acceptable. Elena Martinez learned that the hard way, through tears and tough conversations and nights alone, through FaceTime calls at 3 a.m., and packages from Seoul and the slow, deliberate work of building a life that was hers. And in the end, she learned the most important lesson of all, that the right person doesn't ask you to be smaller, safer, more manageable. The right person asks, "What do you want?" and helps you build it, even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when it means splitting life between two continents and negotiating with family and living in the space between two worlds. Because love, real love, isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your life. It's about finding someone worth rebuilding your life around, someone worth the risk, someone worth the choice. And Elena chose, again and again and again, through every doubt, every fear, every moment when the safe choice beckoned and the easy path whispered her name. She chose truth. She chose herself. She chose love without guarantees. And that made all the difference.